Todd Monken made a pretty honest admission about the Baltimore Ravens offense and where they are right now over the course of what has been 2023 training camp. We talk about why what he said is not something to panic over. All that and more coming up next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in here to another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host here, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, as always on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. I appreciate everybody who is here today, making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every day, free and available, all podcasting platforms, including in video form on YouTube. And I know Google Podcasts for this show apparently directs right to Locked On NFL, which I do host on Monday. So if it's not where you get your podcast, usually, I promise you it's somewhere else. Q, you know, right? We have Qadry Ismail here in the house. You know, technology sometimes can't be our friend all the time, so we kind of have to work through that. But how are you doing on this fine Purple Friday?
I'm doing wonderful. It feels like you're having a Devonta Freeman kind of moment. So, you know, technology and Devontae, they go hand in hand. But with that said, though, I am doing great. Got a chance to go out to practice and watch the Ravens on both Saturday as well as on Wednesday. And it was just great looking at the guys and seeing what, you know, I think can be a pretty special season.
Yeah, and I want to get to what you've seen so far since you've been out there and what you've heard as well. We'll get to that more so in the final part of the show. But I want to talk about the Todd Monken comments in the first part of the show, Q. I know that, you know, early on in training camp, at least to me, my expectations aren't super high, you know, especially this year for a Baltimore offense that, again, is moving from Greg Roman to Todd Monken, a bunch of new receiving weapons, Lamar coming back from the injury. Essentially what Todd Monken said on Thursday, a couple of comments about how essentially the offense isn't where need to be. He said, quote, "It's a work in progress. We're not nearly where we need to be, and we shouldn't be because it's early in camp, but we have a lot of work to do." And that's when he was asked about the tempo of the offense. And then he was asked about projecting where J.K. Dobbins and Rashad Bateman fit in. And he goes, "Well, right now it's not hard to project because we're not really good right now. We have a long way to go." And, you know, did say that he appreciates the attentiveness of the guys and everything. But some people said, "Oh, they're not good. What? This is impossible." And my thing, Q, is I'm not panicking about this because we're about a week into training camp. It's a whole new offensive system. I don't think it's anything to get super worked up over right now. But I want to hear your opinion on it because this is kind of what was expected for you for the offense early on.
Well, I think if you're looking at, you know, making arrangements to go to the Super Bowl now, I guess you could, and that's your prerogative. But I think it's foolish to jump that far ahead, to think that everything is perfect. And this is the game of football. There are going to be adjustments week to week, practice to practice, moment to moment. Some days are going to be phenomenal. Other days, yeah, a work in progress. There are nuances that he sees that we don't get the privy to see. He sees whether or not a guy got his depth on a route and or didn't. And because he didn't, the ball was picked off. He sees the offensive line making a mistake or the offensive line doing a great job and the quarterback is just not getting the ball out on time. The receivers could be, again, in great position, but this is football. Like, the defense does what it does, and defense just made a better play. So a weekend, from my vantage point, it's cool that he's tempering things and saying we have not arrived. You really, this preseason is as critical of a preseason as it gets for the Ravens. And I think this let's put it to you this way. When you make a battleship and it goes into water, that's all well and good. But it really isn't a battleship until it's tested under fire. And so whether that fire is some mega storm that you're in or an actual conflict that you have to enter. Bottom line, they're still in the midst of building. They haven't been battle tested quite yet.
Yeah, and there are going to be good days for the offense and bad days for the offense, just like there are going to be good and bad days for the defense. And I think one silver lining, I guess I take out of it, Q, is the fact that I know the phrase "iron sharpens iron" might get used a tiny bit too much in some circumstances, but I do like, for example, Eldell versus Marlon Humphrey. That's literally what iron sharpens iron is. I think for Lamar Jackson going up against that defense, just them figuring it out, even if it is little by little, which it seems like it has been. We've heard positive things come out of training camp about Lamar, about Odell, about Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews. It's not like the offense isn't having any success, but in terms of where they want to be versus where they are, I'm sure, hey, they want to have a little more success, whether it's on, 7-on-7s, 11-on-11, but this is the time where you get all the mistakes out, get them all out early, get them all out now, and you can learn from them now, as opposed to, week 2 of the regular season, you're like, oh, this actually counts for something. Right now, it's okay to make those mistakes. So that's why I'm totally fine with them not being up to speed, because, again, they have to figure everything out, and especially just figure out the new offensive system. And what has been, I think, Todd Monken is a very, very detail-oriented guy by all accounts, and I personally think that's a good thing.
Honestly, when I look at like an iron sharpens iron moment, when you're out at training camp, sometimes things can get a little, edgy. I know, for example, when I was watching, I believe it was Red Zone, and Simpson, I believe, the offensive lineman, literally he pancakes Patrick, and he got salty, and there was a scuffle, and like literally everybody running out there, but it wasn't like a I'm getting at you hatred kind of a thing. It was there to break it up. It's a yeah, I want to win. It's a yeah, I want to look good. But it's also, hey, we are a team, and if you do well, I do well, we all do well. And I think that's kind of been the attitude that I've been seeing. I just think this feel that I see from this ball club is a really positive one.
Yeah, it seems like everybody is rooting for each other, and that's what a team should be. Somebody gets the best of you in a rep. It's like, hey, you know what? That's going to help our team out come the regular season, which I think is, a fine mindset to have. Although I know you want to win every rep when you're out there. You don't want to lose any. But Q, with Todd Monken in this offensive system, is there a point in training camp where you'd be concerned if, I guess by the Ravens standard, they weren't where they needed to be? Or are you willing to give them the entirety of training camp, the entirety of the preseason to kind of figure it out before hitting the regular season, and that's okay with you?
Well, I guess if I was seeing a lot of jumping off sides, if I saw a lot of, coaches getting frustrated, like you're not getting your job done, you're not putting yourself in great position, things along those lines, and those things have happened before. Don't get it twisted. I think the main thing is if we're not seeing that, and I'm not, I think that's a great thing. I think that's awesome. I think the fact that you're seeing some healthy depth of competition, whether it be left guard or whether it be the cornerback spot, or you see a high energy group in the defensive ends who's going to be that fourth guy in that nickel package, who's going to be that left guard starting. Like in my mind, bruh, let this be what it needs to be. Like, this is good. This is bad teams are the ones where you see a lot of yelling, a lot of disunity and disjointedness. We're not having it right now. We're having a good, strong, competitive, tough looking, mentally into it, kind of a mindset for this Ravens ball club.
It definitely feels like the vibes are different compared to maybe what it was towards the end of last season. Guys are having fun. Guys are being competitive. And that's what it is, right? People are competitive out there. They want to get the best version of themselves, whether it is a guy like Lamar, who there's no question about his roster status and what his role is on this team, or guys who are fighting to make the roster. It feels like everybody is making everybody better. And that's what you want out of a team like this, especially one that has such high aspirations in what's going to be a super loaded conference, let alone a super loaded division that they're going to be in. So you want to get everything as sharp as you can. And it's okay that, Todd Monken is saying that they're not where they need to be because they have time. They still have pretty much all of August, a little bit of September, and then it's go time. But once you get into the swing of things, if you're the Ravens, I think it'll be a little better and a little more consistent for the offensive group. Coming up in the second part of the show, we'll talk about the latest on Rocky Yassin and getting into the cornerback position a little bit more. So be sure to stay tuned. A lot to get to on Locked On Ravens. But first, this episode is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, and I'm a huge fantasy guy, and August is here, so you know what that means. It's the official start of fantasy football drafting month, and you have to get championship ready for your home league by trying out best ball on Underdog Fantasy. All you have to do is one live snake draft, no waivers, no trades. Underdog sets your best lineup every single week. Underdog's the easiest place to play fantasy football, and it's the best place for best ball 2. Best ball 4 is the largest fantasy football tournament ever, and you have to try out Underdog's Best Ball Mania tournament. The largest fantasy football contest of all time is back, and even bigger, with $15 million of total prizes up for grabs, including an absurd $3 million going to the winner. Last year, the winner drafted their team in July, so don't wait around. Visit UnderdogFantasy.com or find them in the App Store and sign up with promo code LOCKEDON to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. This is Underdog Fantasy promo code LOCKEDON. We're back here, our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostreicher still here with Qadry Ismail and Q. I know there was a little bit of an injury scare during Wednesday's practice when Rocky Yassin goes down, limps off of the field. Now, under his own power, John Harbaugh said initially that it was, leg thing, wasn't serious, but he didn't know. He didn't want to commit to the whole not being. I know he didn't want to get himself in any hot water when it came to the injury status and him saying one thing and then it coming back as another. So he said initially doesn't look anything serious, but we'll see what happens. Ian Rappaport ended up reporting that it in fact was not anything serious. There was nothing structurally wrong with the knee. We don't necessarily have a full timeline yet, but at least it feels like he's not going to be lost for an extended period of time. I mean, when something like that happens, Q, and a guy goes down in training camp practice, what do you kind of think of in terms of next steps, in terms of just assessing the guy, but also figuring out, what a timeline is when you don't necessarily have to practice a guy all the time. You don't want to necessarily risk re-injury at the expense of reps for especially a veteran like Yassin.
They're reporting it was a knee. So to me, it looks like when, I was out there, it looked like his foot got, kind of tangled up and got caught in the turf, and it just kind of tweaked him a little bit. If they're reporting that it's not that serious yesterday, the tests confirmed it today, then it's probably some mild swelling. And now it's about, hey, how can he help himself moving forward? What is helping yourself moving forward? Making sure you're keeping your inflammation down, making sure you're doing, the proper techniques in the rehab. The Ravens have an extensive facility of recovery tools that hopefully he takes advantage of and uses them. I think the other thing is for Jalen Armour-Davis, and there's one other corner that's slipping my mind, but when I was watching them do one-on-ones, and also when they were doing like 7-on-7 and even goal line, like he looked on point. The lights didn't look bright for him. It just looks like, all right, bet, let me go ahead and do my thing. So that was a welcoming sign. When one guy goes down, you got to be able to step right in. Jalen was able to step right in.
Yeah, it really felt like, for what Baltimore has built at the position right now, it's a little dicey when it comes to the veterans versus the young guys. It feels like there is an abundance of young guys who need to step up this year. And for Yassin, it kind of is, the injury scares the reality of the position a little bit when you're talking about, well, first of all, Marlon Humphrey is the most important guy, in my opinion, on the Ravens outside of Lamar. Lamar's Lamar, but in terms of what else they have, if Marlon goes down, I'm not feeling exactly overly confident. Now, look, I'm all for figuring out who you have in training camp. Who is Jalen Armour-Davis? Who is Pepe Williams? Who is, Trayvon Mullen? Who are these guys? You can figure that out in training camp, and that's completely fine. But we do know the history of corner injuries with this team, Q, and it's not a pretty one, where they start the year with 50 million corners and they end the year with 2 almost every single season. So to me, the Yassin thing kind of raises more questions about, well, what if this was a more serious injury? What if Marlon has to miss a few games? What if Rocky Yassin has to be out for a month? Are you confident enough based off of now we've kind of seen like, oh, well, is Rocky Yassin actually injured for real? Is he not? Did that maybe change anything in your mind about where this corner room is for you?
No, not necessarily. I mean, again, everybody is jumping on this corner room like they're, a bunch of stiffs. And yeah, I get it that Marlon has already proved himself, and so be it. And hey, but I don't want to dwell on it. Like, I'm going to say from what I saw was a competitive, spirited practice that from a corner situation, them dudes was out there, they were balling, they were competing, they were doing their thing. I don't think it was bad at all. I think, at the same time, it does suck that, yes, Rock Ya-Sin went down. So let's see how it looks. I don't want to say the world's falling in when the reality of it all is it's week one. Let's see them be as competitive can be, and take it from there.
And I think that's what you want. You want the competition early on. And I like the fact that these guys are getting after it right now because there are snaps to be had. There are plenty of snaps to be had at that position. Yeah. So I'm excited to see who can step up because they really need somebody, or at least a couple guys, to do that. But how much confidence does it give you, Q, knowing that the Ravens have a couple of good safeties back there to maybe help out those guys in Marcus Williams and Kyle Hamilton? What does that do for your overall secondary confidence?
You know how it is when you got like the studs and you just kind of have this swagger because we got them, y'all don't. That's kind of how I feel about Kyle and Marcus. Like when you see them back there, when the ones were out there, of course Zero is doing his thing, but when you see that secondary just like, 32 or 14, what's up? Just like I was like, okay, these dudes are the real deal. They communicate very well. As John Harbaugh say, you got to be obnoxious communication. Cool. But yeah, man, just overall, like, whoo, I'm anxious to see how they both fit. This is Eric Weddle and Jim Leonard, and dare I say, maybe not the level quite of Ed Reed, but can get there. Real cerebral with opportunities to make ball and plays, got that athleticism and talent and physicality to go along with their FBI.
Yeah, I think for Marcus Williams, he's that guy. I know we talked about it when he signed Q, but he was one of those guys that, to me at least, they never had, or not that they never did, because obviously they had Ed Reed there for so many years, but they didn't have that like roamer, free safety type guy since Earl Thomas was there in 2019. I know we can talk about everything that happened with Earl Thomas off the field, but on the field, he was really good for the Ravens. I think it kind of gets swept under the rug because of the fact that it was just such a disaster off of the field. But for Williams, for Kyle Hamilton, who's going to step into a bigger role with Chuck Clark now in New York and unfortunately done for the season already with his ACL injury, those two guys are going to, I think, give support, whether it's, run support, turnovers. There are a lot. So even if the Ravens have to rely on a couple of young guys, if it doesn't necessarily go to plan initially, at least I know that there are a couple of strong safeties. At least they know there are a couple of strong safeties and good players back there in the back half of the field to take some pressure off of those guys. Coming up in the final part of the show, we'll talk a bit about what Q is seeing out there at training camp, offense, defense. We'll talk a little bit about J.K. Dobbins, all that and more still to come on Locked On Ravens. We're back here, our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Osheiker still here with the one, the only Qadry Ismail and Q. There's a lot to like so far, I think, when it comes to Ravens training camp. We've heard all the takeaways. We've seen all the clips the Ravens have posted, but I want to hear what you have seen yourself when you've been out there and just what you've heard overall, what you're excited about from this team overall. Again, it's only been a week, right? It hasn't even been really that long. Yeah. But in the early parts, what have kind of been your takeaways so far?
Again, we talked about the secondary and just their flow and I think their groove as far as, Marlon not being a diva, going up against without flinching OBJ. Zay Flowers, just wow. Nelson Aguilar keeps showing up. And my God, man, he learned how to catch babies. Now, every now and then he got a little relaxed, but, otherwise that fire that's going, like he's catching them. So, I am telling Isaiah Likely, good God, man, that dude, he just flat out gets open and catches the ball. Get open, catch the ball. But it's really fantastic to see, just the way in which everything is coming together. And I still didn't talk about the best linebacking duo in Roquan and obviously in Patrick Queen, defensive standpoint too.
Yeah, there's a lot to like and a lot of depth at not every position, but in a lot of positions. What have you seen out there from Lamar? What excites you about Lamar so far based on everything you've seen and heard?
It's funny because we're just seeing rhythm passing. He's running, but not much. Getting the ball out of his hands quickly is the one thing. I'm trying to think. I mean, they've had some deep shots, but it's been like deep overs. It's been seam routes. Not necessarily anything designed like deep on the outside. The run after catch, in my opinion, is going to dictate what this offense is going to do.
And there's a lot with, I think we just wanted to see tempo last year. We wanted to see no huddle because in the very limited instances we saw at Q, I think it helped everybody. Lamar looked comfortable doing it, but we just didn't see it enough. And I think that now that they're emphasizing the short stuff, they're emphasizing the timing routes in those types of things, it's going to help not only the rhythm for Lamar, but the rhythm of the entire offense and sustaining that over, a full 60 minutes. But I think it's really interesting because, you talked about Zay Flowers, and it feels like he is the absolute just talk of camp right now. Just everybody is on the Zay Flowers hype train. From your estimation, Q, is he already showing he's the real deal out there?
Yes. He shows a suddenness. He shows an explosiveness. He shows a surety in what he's doing. That Commander's practice will tell me a lot more that I need to know. Put it this way. It doesn't help Rashad Bateman, but it helps Rashad Bateman. So Rashad doesn't have to come back. When you look at Duve, he's been getting his reps as well, and he's been looking solid and strong too. This receiving core is deep. That's how impressed I am with the receiving core.
Yeah, there's a lot to like there, but I know Q. J.K. Dobbins, we've talked. You're my J.K. Dobbins guy. We've talked about him all the time ever since this thing started happening. The tweets come out about a month or so ago, probably a little more than that, honestly, at this point. Says how he loves Baltimore and how he wants to stay a Raven for life. But we know the state of the running back position right now. It's not necessarily pretty. I wouldn't say the J.K. Dobbins situation is as ugly as it is in Indianapolis with Jonathan Taylor. And, we don't, I said, we don't have Steve Bisciotti tweeting agents and doing all that crazy stuff, but I don't really know where the Ravens and J.K. Dobbins go from here. We haven't really gotten official word, official clarity on why he's not out there, but I think everybody can kind of put together that it has something to do with his contract. I mean, Melvin Gordon essentially outed him in an interview by saying that J.K. is holding in. He didn't even know it till he got to Baltimore, and they don't make a headline out of it unless you're in Indy, apparently. So, we can put two and two together, Q, and say that, yeah, it's probably something contract related. Ian Rappaport actually said yesterday that Dobbins has the injury that will not be healed. It's the type of injury that gets healed with a new contract, is essentially what he said. Apparently, I don't know whether this is going to bleed completely into the regular season, if this is just a preseason thing where he's waiting to come back, essentially, just to not risk anything right now and then be healthy for the regular season. I think for Todd Monken, he wants to have all his guys on the field learning the offense. I'm not saying JK isn't doing work off the field in terms of learning the playbook, but obviously there's a different element to actually being on the field with the guys in the pads and getting the reps out there. So, I mean, let's just say that Dobbins maybe isn't out there week one. I still predict he does play week one, but let's just say he's not. Where's your confidence level in the running back room with Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, Melvin Gordon, even Keaton Mitchell in there?
Well, the thing is, that's why they're devalued. They're devalued because you can put in other guys and they can do just as well. The thing is, because of the way the offense is going to be structured, there'll be a key cog, Gus Edwards and the like, but they're not going to be the main cog like we saw in Greg Roman's offense.
And I think that it's what the Ravens needed is to, I think, just shift more. They did a great job running the ball, obviously, in there, but there was just there was too little else that they were able to do really well.
Yeah.
It was the run game, and that was it. I think you can still have an effective run game with what they're working with. But now that the pass game is essentially what the hope is going to be 10 times better than what it was under Greg Roman, you can have a more balanced system and a more balanced team, which I think helps. I mean, it feels like Baltimore's balanced both offensively and defensively. Again, we're still super early in training camp, so there's, not a bunch that you can take away from the first week, but there is. Like, you can't take away nothing, but you will still figure out what is to come for this team over the coming weeks. And preseason's coming up, Q. I'm excited to finally have Ravens football back on the field. And we'll be talking about that preseason win streak for the next however long if they keep winning games. Because they're up to 20-some games. They're 20 right now or something crazy. And I always say with the preseason win streak, it's not like they're playing Lamar for 4 quarters every game. I mean, they don't unnecessarily they try to win the games, but it's not like they're trying so hard where they're playing all their starters. But I appreciate you hopping on, Q. Thank you for joining me. And I know, again, that preseason game, it is creeping up rather quickly on us. I'm excited for the Ravens to be back in full pads and playing competition again, even if it is just preseason.
Yeah, no, this is evaluation time, but it's evaluation that you don't have to speculate. You can just see it with your own eyes. So now this is like the real deal. So this is fun. This is great. I think you're not necessarily looking rusty. You're looking pretty good. You're looking pretty solid. Let's go. I'm looking forward to next week and seeing what it looks like.
Yeah, there's a lot of storylines with it as well, and then we'll dive into all that, of course. I'm excited to get into that with you, Q, but I appreciate you as always. And that's all I have for you today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. When we get back here on Monday, there's, of course, more Ravens talk, so be sure to stay tuned. I'll see you right back here on Monday on Locked On Ravens.